Hey everyone, welcome to this talk for the TactiCon about Northgard. My name is Leo, and I'm gonna be presenting this talk today. Okay, so this talk is gonna be about the game Northgard, and more specifically about the post-release design and development of the game. Let's jump right in. Welcome to Northgard. Okay, so first off, you might be wondering who I am. Hi, my name is Leo. I'm the principal designer of the game. I've been a game designer for 10 years now, 9 of which I've spent working on live games and post-release content specifically. So a lot of what I'm about to say here during this talk is mainly true and specifically about Northgard, but is also things I had the opportunity to observe and to learn on other live projects I've worked on. So keep that in mind. Just to give you an idea, in total, I've worked on more than 100 major update releases on various projects, just to give you a scope of my experience. And I've been working on Northgard for the past 3 years. Okay, so what's Northgard? You might be wondering now that you know who I am. Northgard is a real-time strategy game. It's about Viking and Norse mythology. More specifically, it's about Viking clans discovering the mysterious and mystical island of Northgard and fighting to conquer it and for its control. Those clans have different abilities, different specific units, buildings, and are built to be asymmetrical, kind of like the different civilization and factions of those kind of games. The game has elements of settlement building and survival. You have to gather wood and firewood in provision for winter if you do not want your villagers to starve or freeze to death. And the game also have elements of 4X game, namely the map is divided into tiles containing different resources, having different number of buildings you can build in them, and just having offering different opportunities for the players to colonize and to use depending on the type of gameplay they want to go for, as there are different victories that can be achieved. You can go for domination victories and wipe your opponents off the map, but you can also go for a wisdom victory and learn every knowledge in the book, or you can go for an economic victory or fame victory. And there are some victory types that depend on the map generation that you can also go for. So that's for the gameplay presentation overview of the game. And as a bit of trivia, the game is developed by a small team. We are less than 10 people actively working on the game. And we've almost reached 4 million sales, which we're pretty happy about. We are very glad that this game has a lot of players that enjoy it. Okay, so let me give you a brief tour of the history of Northgard now that I'm shown how it started. So the story starts in 2017 with the release in early access on Steam of the game. 1 year later, the game releases in 1.0, having added the PvP and campaign mode at the request of the early access players. And in the same year, the game makes its transition to live game with the release of its third DLC with the additional clan of the snake. That was the first one to join the island post-release. 1 year later, the game reaches 1 million players and sees the addition of the Conquest mode. This mode is a cooperative mode where players can play on special maps with special objectives, and that are kind of designed like missions with unique kind of bonus that they can get, and they have to complete several missions in a row to achieve the victory of the mode. This is kind of a roguelike feel to it, with the cooperative aspects being very enjoyed by the players. It is currently our most played game mode. Later, next year, 2020, sees the release of the editor mode that lets players customize their map and then put special scripts to kind of create their own little special missions, with the support of mode as well. I didn't press on that, but the last two big mode are entirely free updates. They weren't DLCs, and the same is true of this update in 2021 with the expeditions and the addition of cosmetics. Expeditions are basically daily and weekly quests encouraging the players to engage with all the different game modes, all the clans and kind of strategies that they might not have already tried out, or just to diversify themselves. And completing those give access to silver, which is a unique currency that let the player unlock cosmetics. This feels like free-to-play monetization, but it is not. This is entirely free and only accessible via gameplay. We do not sell this currency, and the only way to unlock the cosmetics are by playing the game. Later, 2022 sees the release of the second campaign of the game, Cross of Vidar, a highly requested follow-up to the first campaign that also sees the addition of a second faction in the game with the arrival on the island of the European kingdoms. This campaign is a DLC, which also contains new clans based on this new faction. 2023, the game reaches 3 million players and sees the addition of the spectator mode and globally a big visual upgrade of many elements of the game. The units, the environment sees a big rework, many of the buildings, model textures, just a big visual upgrade to give a fresh look to the game. Which brings us to today, where the game is now standing with 4 different game mods, 2 campaigns, 2 different factions spreading over 19 clans. So that's the 6 initial clans with the base game and 13 DLCs. With those 13 DLCs came 12 free major updates, adding new game modes, new game elements, and so on. The 13th one being in the work right now and preparing for the release of the 5th unique game mode of the game. Okay, so that's Northgard, where it started, where it is right now. The next logical question is what happened in between, how we got here. And the first element of answer about this is by building the game in relation with the community. It is something that started very early within the game, basically from the get-go. As the game released in early access, it allowed the early players to take part in the direction the game was going, to talk to the team, explain where they wanted the game to go, what types of addition they wanted for the game, and so on. So that led to the addition of the campaign, the PvP mode, and to many adjustments and many iterations on the game to define the direction that it follows up to this day. And after the release of the game, it is something that stayed very relevant, as even to this day, each year we release big surveys that we send at the end of the year to ask every players that want to take part in it what they like the most about the game, what they think might need some rework, what they want for the future, if there are some additions they would like to see, basically all that. Then we take all those, we define within ourselves what we want to tackle first, what are the priority that we want to work on in the upcoming year, and we, for the last 2 years, we've put that in the form of a roadmap that we then publicly release so that the players can see what we're gonna work on, what's gonna be coming during the year. And basically it's the way to reassure them that we are tackling the point that they want the most, or if they feel like we might have missed something, or maybe they're wondering how we're going to go about something. They're not sure it's going the direction they want. Well, they can provide feedback on that, and we can always adjust and redirect as we're working on it, as it is globally just big points that we want to tackle, but it says nothing about the precise solution that we're going to implement, because this as well we define with the community. So once we decided what we want to work on and the direction we want to go, we still work with the community to get feedback during the development and be sure that this is coming up as it's supposed to be. We used closed betas for DLCs and early iterations on the features to basically check the direction and the experience we want to provide, to check with a small pool of players initially. I think it's around 30 players we have in closed beta that we can have direct discussions with. We can play game with them so they can directly provide feedbacks to us, sometimes very honest feedback about what works, what doesn't, so we can readjust. Once we're satisfied with that, the public, the free updates go into open betas, where we can invite basically all the players that want to join in. So we can get a lot more feedback regarding specifically the balancing, catching bugs before the release that we might have missed, confirm that the direction is still something the players want, but we have less leniency at this point to redirect. So usually at this point, we're pretty confident with the direction we're going, and it's more about fine-tuning the values and all the final aspects before the release, so that the release can be as clean as possible. And of course, we also follow all the discussions that happen on the various forums, the various videos that players might post on YouTube of them testing the feature, playing in the open betas, and them experiencing the feature for themselves, and so on. And of course, this doesn't end once the feature is released, as we also keep track of the players' opinion and problems they might have with a feature even after it's released. We have a system of in-game reports, which is basically a button that players can press to send the feedback or report a bug directly from in-game. We have on the Discord a feedback feature where players can post their opinion on a feature, something that might be a problem or a suggestion to address an issue that they might have, and other players can come and vote up or down for the features. And once a month, we go back and have a big look at all the features that got the most vote and see which one we can decide we're going to implement during the big during the next update. Sorry. So we always try, whenever we make a big update, a big patch, whether it's a free major update or simply a balancing tweak, or even sometimes a bug fix, if we can squeeze quality of life or simple adjustments requested by the community in there, we try to do it as soon as possible. And of course, we try to catch data as well about what the players are doing within the game, to contrast with what the players are saying, because this is very useful, but also there are a lot of players that never go to the forum, the official Discord, and so on. So we have to know what those players are doing as well, and make sure that there are no game elements that are overused or never played with, underused, and to readjust all those. Of course, the idea being that even once we've released content for the game, we always look for future improvements and adjustments that might be needed. So that's for the community part. But, oh, no, sorry. Yeah. So community drives a lot of what we're doing and what we're tackling. And a question that is fair to ask is how much the market and competition drive the expectations of the players and what they expect from the game. Hopefully, Northgard is kind of different enough that it's created its own of sort of own type of game. We do not see too many comparisons, but it's still an RTS, and so of course you're still gonna have comparisons with like the big name Blizzard, Microsoft with Warcraft, Starcraft, Age of Empire, Age of Mythology, which is coming back soon. So our approach regarding this is we try to follow industry standards and the best examples in the genre, but in the limit of our own capacity. Like I said, we're still a small team, so we cannot directly compete with Blizzard and Microsoft. So we try to identify which are really really big games that we feel are necessary, and we start with the minimum viable product. We push this version, and then we iterate on it once it's pushed and once it's on the game to add all the layers that are necessary to reach the level of completion and yeah, the level of feature that might be available from start in our games, because that's just more comfortable for us to work in this regard, to put something up out on the game and then work with the players to know what they really need and what might not be that necessary to really focus on the most required elements. One good example of this is the matchmaking, which is a feature that many multiplayer um, players requested for the game, and many saw this as an industry standard, basically. But we were very cautious about putting it in the game, as this requires a lot of players to work correctly. We weren't too sure about how much time we would have to readjust and fix it if the system wasn't working properly or how we intended it to. So we declined it for a long time. Every time players asked for it, we said, well, no, that's not really something we can implement. Eventually, the demand became so strong that we gave in. Basically, I don't want this to sound too negative, because ultimately it's good that we implemented it. But yeah, it took a lot of players' demand for us to make the jump and think, okay, maybe this is worth it. And this is how we worked toward it. We implemented the smallest version possible for it to work, and then since we are adding features on top of the base feature that we created to reach the level of complexity and of completion it needs to be. So we're still iterating on it, and we are making sure that every part is fine with players along the way. Okay, so that was for the community part and where how we decide what we want to add, what we want to tackle, where we set our priorities. Now, when it comes to really designing the thing and creating the features, how we work is, like I said, we let the players tell us what are the priorities for them and where they want us to go. But we still define how we want to go there. We still make the final calls. And I think the reason for that, well, I think the important reason for that, it's important for us to keep in mind the bigger picture, and not to make changes on the game that might be beneficial to some of the players and some of the ways they might enjoy the game, but detrimental to other parts of the communities that might enjoy the game in a different ways. Like we have very very type of players. Some very much enjoy the single player, some very much enjoy the multiplayer, the competitive aspects, or the cooperative. And it's important that whenever we change something, we, as much as possible, do it to accommodate and fit all players' demand. This being said, during the beta phase, we're very much more lenient on this. During the closed beta, especially, it very often happens that a player will, or many players will suggest something, a change, or will point an issue and propose a fix for it. And if we have the time, we might just follow it and say, look, okay, let's try it. We'll see where it takes us, but why not? Let's see what it does. And of course, if ultimately we see that it doesn't fit with our vision, we are making the final calls again. But we are not against following the player's intuition when we are in the setting that allows it. And the final point why we think it's important that we still define the direction of the game is to challenge the players. Okay, so what do I mean specifically by challenging the players? There's a kind of well-known paradox among designers, which is that the more we love a game, the more we play it, the more we become better and good at identifying its patterns and solving the puzzle it poses us, basically. And the more we do this, the more automatic our responses become, and the less we have to consciously think about it. And so the less we are engaged and the less we think about what we do within the game, which is problematic because that leads to less satisfying experience. And to give you an idea, Northgard is very much subject to this, as some of the players are approaching the 3,000 hours spent of the game. I think some of them might actually be above that. And so basically, we need to find a way to keep the game fresh and to keep those players enjoying the game and still getting this feeling that they can get better and they can learn new things and they can still be surprised by the game, basically. And so one of the ways I think are pretty effective to do that is to identify the shortcuts, the automatisms that the players are taking and breaking them. That can sound a bit hard, but it's really for the good of the players, believe me. So what do I mean by automatisms? I mean everything that the players might do without thinking about them. Habits, comfort zone, they might only play in a certain way because that's the only way they feel comfortable playing, or they might have identified the dominant strategies, so they're only using that and not using the rest of the game elements at their disposition. Everything that becomes basically a no-brainer when the players know, or they think they know, which is the better option and which is the better move in each situation. That's something we want to identify and we want to disrupt, basically. When I say disrupt, I do not mean remove this option entirely, because I think that's cool that the players can be pretty confident and pretty familiar with some of the aspects of the game that they enjoy the most. But it's more about proposing alternatives and making sure that not all players are going for those options and that there is no just one fits all solution that all players can use to answer all of their problems. Basically, you want to avoid dominant strategies, you want to avoid one meta being the most dominant above all else. Those are kind of almost always true, and that's why balancing reworks and keeping track of everything about what the players are doing are so important about this. I'm just making a bit of an aside here because this can seem pretty counterintuitive, right? Like the players are as players, we tend to look for the most control, the safest ways and the more efficient ways to achieve our objectives and to achieve victory. But doing so, we're often neglecting the most risky option and the more interesting options in the process, as it is often more satisfying to succeed when success is uncertain rather than when it is a guarantee. This is the very definition of an epic victory. It is why it is the most satisfactory type of victory. It's because it's so unexpected that it is that much gratifying. And so it is important, I believe, as developers and as designers, especially, to keep the players on their toes and to keep surprising them, to avoid them becoming too comfortable with the things that they know they master. And live format for live games offer unique opportunities to do very much that, as you can always iterate and change some of the rules and some of the elements that the players have become the more familiar with. Okay, so let's see a concrete example of this in Northgard. The Clan of the Rats. Okay, so first off, a bit of information about healing in Northgard. In Northgard, when your villagers get wounded because either there was a wolf who attacked your settlement, or there was a sickness and they got hurt, or many other hazards, you can build a healer hut, assign healers, and let them take care of the wounded units to bring it back to full health. And it is something you often want to do because there are many negative asides from having wounded units. The settlement as a whole is going to be unhappy, the unit is going to be less efficient at production, and so on. And so healing has never been designed to be a deep feature with many aspects. It's more of a feature that is here because you might need it. Just simple as that. But the most competitive players have figured out that it is a waste of resources. Basically, the healers, when they're working, they're not assigned at anything else, at producing resources, at doing anything that would be considered more useful at this point. And so one of the most basic learnings that players have gotten from this at a certain point of the game is you never use healing. When you get a wounded units, you turn them into scouts and you send them in the middle of the woods until they die. Or you just put them first in line when the first wolves attack your settlement to make sure they die before the others, and you get rid of them instead of healing them, basically. And so that's one of the shortcuts that the players have learned over the years. And so when we before release, when we designed the Clan of the Rat, we designed it as a clan entirely centered around having wounded units and healing them. In order to play the clan in an optimized way, you have to have wounded units, because with this clan, units that are wounded consume less resources. They make your new units arrive faster, and it's just the most optimized way of playing with the clan. And in exchange for that, the clan has a unique unit, which is a shaman that can heal the unit back to life quicker and can also do that during battle and so on. But so for those competitive players who had learned to never have wounded units and never healing them, the new way they had to learn to play this clan competitively forced them to unlearn what they had previously learned about healing and about having wounded units in their clan. And so this completely forced them to rediscover a mechanic of the clan. And so because of that, the clan was very well received, and a lot of experienced players had a lot of fun with it. A bit of a note on this, though. Although the clan was really, really well received and really fun for experienced players and competitive players, it was way more difficult to approach for new players that were still in the process of learning how to deal with their 1A units, or that hadn't built the shortcut yet, or simply were not playing it that way. So there's a balance to find between challenging the most experienced players and still proposing things that are friendly to the newcomers. I'll talk specifically about this a bit later, but yeah, it's always kind of a difficult balance to find. Um, Trying and failing. Yeah, challenging players mean that we have to take risks. We have to try new things. We have to take them into directions that we hadn't gone before, just to propose them something new, take them out of their comfort zone. And so sometimes things just doesn't work as we've expected. So I have many examples of this, but those two ones are pretty speak for themselves. I think one of the features that didn't work as planned was the diplomatic stances. This was supposed to be a catch-up mechanic that we implemented, and basically when another opponent clans was ahead of you in some of resource production or some aspects of the game, they had more fame, they had unlocked more knowledge than you had, you could adopt a specific diplomatic stance against them, which would give them a specific bonus, and to you another bonus that would help you and your clan catch up on them. It was fun on the paper and in game kind of too, but the problem is this became way too disruptive for the game balance, as some players in multiplayer especially would choose to get behind on some of the game resources in order to adopt those stances and to get a bonus to get back at some of the players faster and so on. And we tried many times to balance it, but it just wasn't working out. So ultimately we reworked them completely into something that is way more less asymmetrical. It's more of a both beneficial bonus that requires both clan to take positive actions toward one another, and watch once they reach a certain relation point, they get a bonus that impacts them both, and that's a way more balanced approach to what it was. Another example of things that didn't go as planned was the release of the second campaign of the game, the Cross of Vidar campaign, which, due to a short development time, released with many bugs and balance issues on some of the missions and things that which simply had not anticipated. And so the reaction on launch was not that great from the players. Hopefully, live games and live format allows us to keep working on those features post release, like I said, and to always come back and try to fix what needs fixing. And so that's what we did. Just like with the diplomatic stance, we kept working on the bugs, kept working on the balance issues, and it eventually got to the level of quality that we wanted. So that's one of the big advantages of live game formats. This being said, every time we add new things and we increase the scope of the game by adding new elements to challenge the players and their knowledge of the game, the scope of the game becomes bigger, and so that opens up the chances for problems. Either those are bugs or balance issues, or simply the need to keep producing content for everything we have in a game. Every new game mode requires new content to being enjoyed by the players that have played it a lot and to just stay fresh in the player's mind. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Um, and that's, I think, one of the biggest challenge of live design on a game like Northgard is that you really want to leave no one behind. What I mean by that is we have many different players type now that enjoy the game in different ways, and we have many elements in the game, many different clans now, a lot more than we had on release, and all those elements have to be balanced against one another. So that's a big challenge for the team and basically for all the team members. So on the game design side of things, that means creating new game elements and keep bringing new new content to play with, doing rework and balancing of the elements that are gaining off balance, or just to make sure that they are um, balanced compared to one another, and yeah, just surprising the players with new twists and simple adjustments to keep things fresh. For the art team, we've made a change a few years ago, I believe, maybe 2 years ago, from static illustrations in the game to animated illustrations. So more of a that's more complex approach and more work required on new illustrations. There's been, like I said, last year, a big update on the visual aspect of the game. So that were the models, the textures, and there is globally always work done on every aspect of the game to polish more what can be polished, adding effects, adding juiciness, bounciness to every bit of elements that can be improved or that can be more shiny, more pleasing for the players. So that's a constant work. And of course, regarding the code and the programmation of the game, that is also a quite heavy challenge because every modifications, every change we make to the existing systems of the game means that those systems need to be flexible and they sometimes need to be entirely reworked to fit those new needs. We've recently made a complete rework of how the AI works in the game because players were not satisfied with how the AI worked. We've added the matchmaking, like I said, which was a big work on the how the multiplayer worked. And yeah, just constantly optimization of the systems and reworking them to be fitting with everything we added to the game and also the things that we are currently working toward adding to the game as well. So if I have to tell you about one specific example that regroups all those, it would be the rework of the Wisdom Victory that we did a few months ago. So basically, the previous Wisdom Victory was simply a tiebreaker. Once you got once you unlocked almost every knowledge that you could, you basically unlocked a button that, when pressed, triggered the Wisdom Victory and you would win the game. This was meant as a way to make sure that the game would not go past a certain time, to make sure that at some point one of the players would be able to win in this way. But the problem it got is that is this meant that if a player got sufficiently good at defense, they could voluntarily drag the game towards this point and reach a point where they were absolutely certain to win and there were nothing that the opponent clans could do to react, which was very frustrating. And on the other end, there was not much that could be done to achieve this victory faster, because it would eventually necessarily happen in the late game. And so if the opponent clans were very fast, it was simply unavailable. And so what we opted to do was to make the wisdom option available way sooner in the game, but instead of just making the players win, what it now does is it unlock a specific building, which is kind of the wonder of a wonder building that requires a lot of resources and takes a lot of time to build. And once it's built, it has to be fueled by the knowledge resource of the clan during a certain amount of months in game. So that means that players can choose to go for this victory sooner, but it is a risk because the building can be attacked by opponent clans, and the more the building is exposed, the faster it charges as it spreads its influence over the adjacent clans, basically. So that's an option we gave the players of waiting till the end games and being more safe, or wanting to go for this sooner but taking risks and taking the risk of appearing like a more appealing target to the aggressive clans. So something that's way more interesting and more interactive between the different clans that are in game. But also, of course, so this required our team to design this new building with the associated effects. And as I've mentioned, we've added the European kingdoms now, so they don't have the same gods and the same beliefs as the Vikings do. So that means having a same building with the same use but decline, um, but with two variations, one for Vikings, one for the European kingdoms, that would be still visually linked enough that the players would comprehend what they were looking at, and that those two were basically the same building with the same effects, but each linked to a different faction. And of course, this required the victory to be reworked with the entire system rework, and also the separation of the knowledge for the Vikings and the faith, which is the resource that the kingdoms are accumulating. And so that was a big work that required iterations and work on what was already in the game from the entire team to create something new that we felt required to a challenge, required change to be more fitting with the current state of the game. And yeah, that's how we went about it. But of course, there's only so much we can do at once. We're not a huge team, we're less than 10 people, and so we really have to prioritize and to choose what we want to tackle at what time, and to really focus on a few changes at once. We cannot do everything we would like to do if we were 100 working on a game, basically. And that's a specific challenge because we know that we have many different types of players that enjoy very different things about the game. Like you can see here, the type of players we have: per game mode, we have the conquest mode, we have the multiplayer, you have the single player, we have the campaign, and those players basically enjoy the game on a different level each, even if they enjoy elements that are common between those types of gameplay, like the different clans and so on. They still have different requests, and they enjoy different things, basically. So we have to be careful that we do not like let down any of them, basically. So we are very cautious to try to balance things out and basically have a rotation approach. Like last year we've released an update that was really focused on multiplayer and player versus player, with the addition of the matchmaking system, a lot of rework of military systems, and a lot of balancing specifically designed for the PvP. And later, we then contrasted that with an approach that is way more focused on cooperation and single player. And we're at this very moment working toward adding new things for players that prefer cooperations and solo gameplay, maybe. So we try to balance things out. Same things with paid versus free content. We want to absolutely avoid the notion of players feeling like the game is pay to win. We really want the new clans to be balanced with the others. The idea is not to have players buy the new clans that we release to have an edge of, or to have an advantage. The idea is to bring a new way of playing the game and new gameplay, but not to give a competitive advantage with those new clans. Same thing, each time we release a new clan, we also release new missions for the conquest mode that are specifically designed to challenge the gameplay of this clan, but those are released for free and are accessible to all the other clans in the pool of missions that they can encounter. So we try to always have content that is gonna appeal to at least all of the, at least in part, to all of the players, no matter what type of gameplay they prefer. And when we really are working on big updates that are specifically designed to target one type of players, we try to alternate to make sure that no type of players feels like left behind, or that they don't get new content for a long time. Again, a bit of an aside about that. There's this thing called curse of knowledge that I am can be kind of a struggle when we have players that are very experienced and develop a very competitive way to play the game, because we have to know about those strategies. We have to know the shortcuts and the optimizations that those players are using. We do not have to be able to execute them. I think my personal stance is that it's better not to become too efficient at the game, as it runs the risk of introducing this kind of bias in the design, and considering that some of the game aspects are not worth playing with, as they are suboptimal or not optimized. And so we try to find a good place in our skill level between understanding the struggle that newcomers to the game might encounter, while in the meantime being familiar with the most competitive and most developed strategies that competitive players are using. But it's kind of a difficult balance to strike. And like I said previously, the more we play on the game, the better we become, simply by playing the game and becoming more familiar with the mechanics. And sometimes this can lead to designs that are a bit divisive. Like an example of that is our latest Clan of the Hounds, was very divisive on release, sorry, because the new players, or the more single player focused players, I should say, uh, found it way too weak to be fun to play, while the competitive players clearly saw the way to exploit it and take shortcuts with it. And so it has way too strong and breaking the entire meta of the game. And so we had to nerf the clans, but in the meantime, we knew that doing this was frustrating for the single players, because they already had struggled playing the games correctly with the clan. And so yeah, that's one of the point. I think we might reaching a point where we might have lost a bit of connection with what it feels like to be a newcomer to Northgard, which is, I think, unavoidable. I'm almost at my thousands hours of gameplay on the game. At some point, we naturally become better at it, but I think that's still difficult. It's something we try to be as equal as we can on this, but it's difficult. And that's one of the reasons we have to rely on the community so much. I think it's best that we do not become highly competitive players ourselves, but having those kind of players in the closed beta, especially talking to us, explaining to us what the potential exploits can be with the changes that we're making is something very invaluable that help us balance the game. And on the other spectrum, having newcomers to the game, or at least players that play mainly single player and have a more chill approach, I would say, to the game in the open betas or even in the closed betas if they want to join, and giving us their side of their perception of the gameplay, what they think are difficult to understand or difficult to use or might be too high skill and approach and so on, so we can balance between the two, is something we absolutely need. And that's one more example of why you need the community to design the game for every type of player. So that's a lot of things we have to balance. And at some point, I think it would be fair to wonder, aren't there some of the parts of the game that we regret adding or things like that? Are there some parts that we would prefer leaving on the side to focus on more specific aspects of the game over parts and so on? But hopefully, how we stand right now in the game is that all those different game modes and all those different type of players seem to still overlap and feed into one another. Like, for example, the one way of playing the game that has emerged naturally from the players experiencing it is playing it cooperatively, and this emerged both in the single player environment with the conquest mode, which, like I said, is a cooperative mode which is very much enjoyed by the players, and the same happened in player versus player environment, with the most played mode being 3v3. And so this led us to reinforces the synergies between the clan and the cooperative aspects of the clan, leading to more synergies, more cooperation between them, and the clans having identities being reinforced by fitting into natural into more specific roles that the communities have dictate themselves. Like, you have a clan that is specifically designed to scrut the map and to reveal the different tiles it contains. One other will specifically be designed to kill the hostile creatures in the environment and so on. And so that creates a game that is more interesting for everyone, no matter what part of the game you enjoy. So I think that's still a mutually beneficial notion to the game. So that's cool. Yes, that's basically it for what's Northgard and how it went here. A bit of words are on now that we know where we come from and how we got here. Where are we going next? So first off, we're still applying all those ideas and all those ways of working. Those are still true of how we treat the game currently and how we plan on working with it in the future. Live format is still a very interesting way of approaching the game for Northgard especially, and for the community that it has built. Of course, like for all formats, it brings with it specific challenges that needs to be taken into account, but until now we've managed to overcome them, and so we hope that we'll still be able to do that in the future. And talking about the future, there are still things that we learn along the way, of course, that if we had to build the game from scratch today, we would do differently. One of the thing is building the game from the get-go to be flexible and to be expanded on, because that's something that requires system to be easy to modify, to expand, to switch when you need. It's not something that is entirely that wasn't there within the game, but it wasn't that strong, and that's something that's taken a lot of work that we would work from the get-go if we had to anticipate and do the game now. And another thing is finding the rhythm for live design, like how much time between a new update we put, the balance, like I said, of how do you prioritize between an update that is focused for player versus players, an update focused on single players, and how we combine those is something we're still iterating on at this point. We used to release free content and DLC at the same times, but this led to problem as the team had to focus on two different patches at once, and it was difficult to manage. So now we're spreading them further apart. The free content is released 1 month before the DLC is released, and that's proving to be much better, more comfortable for the team, and leading to more polished release for the players. So yeah, we're still learning along the with the game, and iterating on everything, the game, the process, our learnings, and our knowledge of both our community and how we work best. And that's something we're keeping in mind as we're heading forward, and we're working on the fifth game mode, which is again challenging both the players and us, as this time we'll release a game mode that will be able to be played cooperatively with 4 different players at once, which is something that had never been done before. So yeah, excited for that. And that's basically it about Northgard and its live design. Thank you very much for listening to this talk. Thank you for the TactiCon and everyone involved for having us. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to stay up to date with what's going on with Northgard and where we're going next, you can join the official Discord or look at the game on Steam. The usual stuff. And yeah, basically that's it. Thanks again. See you around.